The smell of my husband's coffee still lingered in the kitchen when I heard the front gate click shut. That small, ordinary sound used to mean nothing to me. Now it means everything. My name is Sarah, and 8 months ago, I married a man I believed was the most devoted father I had ever seen. Daniel was a widower. His first wife, Renee, had died of a sudden cardiac event 3 years before we met. He had a son, Marcus, who was 12 years old, and confined to a wheelchair after a spinal injury from a car accident that happened the same night Renee died. Daniel told me the crash took everything from him in a single evening: his wife and the use of his son's legs. When I first met Marcus, he barely looked at me. His eyes stayed on the floor, on his hands, on the window, anywhere but my face. Daniel explained that Marcus had developed severe anxiety and selective mutism after the accident. He hadn't spoken a full sentence to anyone outside a medical professional in over 2 years. He needs consistency, Daniel told me on our third date, his voice low and careful. He needs someone who won't leave. I was 28 years old, working as a dental hygienist in Raleigh, North Carolina. I had grown up watching my own mother sacrifice everything for our family with zero recognition and zero complaint. When I looked at Daniel, this quiet, handsome, exhausted man raising a disabled child alone, I didn't see a red flag. I saw a man who needed exactly the kind of love I had been saving up my entire life. We got married 14 months after we met. Small ceremony, backyard, 40 guests. Marcus sat in his wheelchair near the rose bushes and didn't clap, but he watched the whole thing. Daniel squeezed my hand during our vows and whispered, "You saved us." I believed him. The house was Daniel's, a 4-bedroom colonial in a quiet neighborhood outside Raleigh. Nice street, nice neighbors, attached garage, tall wooden fence around the backyard. The front gate had an electronic lock that Daniel controlled from his phone. He said he'd installed it after a neighborhood break-in 2 years before I moved in. I thought nothing of it. My daily routine became Marcus. I woke at 6:30, made his breakfast, helped him transfer from his bed to his wheelchair, changed his catheter bag, administered his morning medications, a muscle relaxant, and a calcium supplement, according to the labels Daniel had printed and laminated above the bathroom shelf. I took Marcus to his twice-weekly physical therapy appointments. I read to him in the evenings when Daniel worked late, which was often. I learned to anticipate what he needed before he could gesture for it, because gesturing was sometimes all he could do. Marcus never seemed ungrateful. He would nod when I brought him something he liked. He would push his food around the plate in a way that I came to understand meant he wanted more. Sometimes when I tucked the blanket around his legs at night, he would look at me for just a second longer than usual. I told myself that was his version of thank you. Daniel, meanwhile, was building something. He worked in commercial real estate development, long hours, frequent travel, conference calls at odd times of night. We had dinner together maybe 3 times a week. On weekends he golfed. He bought me flowers on our anniversary and a bracelet for my birthday and told his friends I was a saint. I had started to notice, quietly and without saying it out loud, that being called a saint felt less like a compliment and more like a job title. 3 weeks before everything changed, I found a document. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for our homeowner's insurance card because the refrigerator had started making a grinding noise and I wanted to check if appliances were covered. I opened the filing cabinet in Daniel's home office and flipped through the folders, and between mortgage and medical Marcus, I found a folder labeled simply L.I. Life insurance. There were 2 policies inside. One was on Daniel himself, which I expected. The other was on me. $2 million taken out 6 months after our wedding, with Daniel listed as the sole beneficiary. The policy had a clause highlighted in yellow marker. I remember thinking it was strange that someone had highlighted it, like they had read it carefully, intentionally. The clause said that in the event of accidental death, the payout doubled. $4 million. I stood in that office for a long time. I told myself there was a reasonable explanation. People took out life insurance on spouses. It was responsible. The highlighted clause meant nothing. I put the folder back exactly where I'd found it, closed the cabinet, and went to fix Marcus his afternoon snack. But that night, after Daniel fell asleep, I lay in the dark and did the math I had been refusing to do for months. Daniel never hired a caregiver for Marcus, despite having more than enough money. He had specifically sought out a woman, me, who had experience with medical care and a documented history of taking care of others. I had mentioned my mother's illness on our first date. He had listened with such focused attention. The physical therapy appointments I took Marcus to, I realized I had never actually spoken with the therapist. I dropped Marcus at the door and waited in the car because Daniel said Marcus was embarrassed to have me watch. I had never questioned that. I didn't sleep. The next morning, Daniel announced he had a 3-day conference in Charlotte. He would leave Thursday morning and return Saturday evening. He kissed me on the cheek, told me there was cash in the kitchen drawer if I needed anything, and said Marcus had a therapy appointment Friday at 2. Thursday morning came gray and cold for October. I stood on the front porch and watched Daniel load his suitcase into the back of his Lexus. He turned and waved from the end of the driveway, unhurried, relaxed. The gate swung open electronically, his car rolled through, and the gate clicked shut behind him. I stood there a moment longer than I needed to. Then I heard a sound from inside the house that stopped every thought in my head. Footsteps, not the soft roll of wheelchair wheels on hardwood. Footsteps, 2 feet, moving steadily from the hallway toward the kitchen. I turned around so fast I grabbed the doorframe to keep my balance. Marcus was standing in the kitchen doorway. Not sitting, not in his chair, standing both feet flat on the floor, one hand resting lightly against the wall, looking directly at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Alert. Focused. Older than 12. My mouth opened, and nothing came out. Sarah. His voice was low and a little rough from disuse but clear. Completely clear. I need you to listen to me right now and I need you to stay calm, okay? Can you do that? I couldn't speak. I nodded. There's a gas smell in the kitchen. Has been for about 10 minutes. I shut off the stove valve already, but we need to open the windows. He moved past me, walked past me, steady on his feet, and pushed the kitchen window up, then the one over the sink. Do not turn on any lights. Do not use your phone inside the house. I followed him on pure autopilot, unlocking and pushing up the living room windows while my brain screamed at me to process what I was seeing. When we had opened every window on the ground floor, Marcus pointed at the back door. Outside. We sat on the back porch steps in the cold October air. My hands were shaking. Marcus sat next to me, elbows on his knees, breathing slowly like someone waiting for the right moment to explain something difficult. How long? I finally said. My voice sounded strange to me. How long have you been able to walk? He looked at the yard for a moment. Since about 6 weeks after the accident. The accident was 3 years ago. Marcus, I know. He turned to look at me, and I could see it now, the way he'd been carrying something enormous for a very long time. I need to tell you everything and then we need to figure out what to do, because my father is not in Charlotte. The cold went straight through me. His conference is real, Marcus said, but it ends today, not Saturday. I saw his email confirmation on the tablet 3 days ago. He's coming back tonight. I thought about the insurance policy. The highlighted clause. $4 million on accidental death. The gas, I said slowly. Marcus nodded once. The regulator on the stove, the part that stops gas flow when the burner's off, it's been modified. I noticed it 2 days ago when I came down at night. It was leaking slowly, just enough that it wouldn't be obvious unless you were close to the floor and paying attention. He paused. I've been sleeping light for a while. Why? I said. And I wasn't sure if I was asking why he'd been sleeping light or why any of this was happening, and Marcus seemed to understand that. My mom didn't have a cardiac event, he said quietly. I was in the car with her that night. She was crying. She had just found out about something. I didn't understand it then. I was 9. But I heard her on the phone before we got in the car. She was talking to someone about money, about an insurance policy, about being afraid. The back of my throat burned. The crash wasn't an accident, Marcus said. He ran her off the road. I don't know how to prove it, but I know what I heard. And I know that 2 weeks before she died, she told me that if anything ever happened to her, I should pretend. She used that exact word, pretend. She said it might be the thing that kept me safe. 9 years old. A 9-year-old boy who loved his mother had spent 3 years pretending to be paralyzed because she had told him it might save his life. And she had been right. I pressed my hands flat on my knees to stop them shaking. He doesn't know I can walk, Marcus continued. He doesn't know I'm not mute. The only people who've ever seen me walk since the accident are my mom's sister, Aunt Claire, and she lives in Portland, and she's been trying to get custody of me for 2 years. My dad's lawyers have been blocking it. She thinks I'm still. He stopped. She doesn't know the truth either. I couldn't tell her safely. We have to call someone, I said. We have to call the police right now. My phone doesn't work inside the house. He has the Wi-Fi restricted, and my cellular is on his plan. He has parental controls that block outgoing calls except to him and the house landline. He looked at me. But you have your own phone plan. I reached into my pocket. My phone showed 2 bars of LTE. My hands were so unsteady I almost dropped it. I opened my contacts. I scrolled to find someone, my sister, the police, anyone, and then Marcus said, "Wait." I looked up. He was staring at the fence line. "The gate," he said. "Can you open the gate from out here?" It's controlled from his phone. "What about the emergency release?" "There's supposed to be a manual override on the inside of the gate for fire codes." "I read about it when he had it installed. I read everything when I have nothing else to do." He stood up. "I'll check. You call." He moved across the backyard with a quiet, sure-footed ease that I realized had probably been practiced in the dark, in the middle of the night, for 3 years. He had been living a secret life inside this house, and he had been doing it to survive. I dialed 900 ELF. The dispatcher answered on the second ring. I kept my voice as level as I could and told her there was a gas leak at our address, and then, before she could start her safety script, I said, "I also need to report that I believe my husband has tampered with our gas line intentionally, and he may be returning to the house tonight. I have reason to believe he is dangerous." I gave her Daniel's name, his car make and license plate from memory, and our address again. She told me to stay outside. She told me units were on the way. She stayed on the line with me. Marcus came back across the yard. "The override works." I got the gate open. The first police unit arrived in 11 minutes, 2 officers, a gas company emergency truck 4 minutes behind them. The officers took our statements separately, then together. I showed them the insurance policy photos I had taken on my phone the week before. I hadn't fully admitted to myself why I'd taken them, but some part of me had known. Marcus told them, in full sentences, in a clear, steady voice, everything he had just told me about the night his mother died. One of the officers, a woman with a calm, practiced manner, crouched down to Marcus's eye level, even though he was standing, and said, "That took a lot of courage, son. Keeping yourself safe that long." Marcus didn't cry, he just nodded, and I watched his jaw work like he was holding something in very carefully. The gas company technician came out of the house 30 minutes later, and confirmed it to the officer in a voice I could partially hear from where I was standing. The regulator had been manually altered. It was not wear and tear, it was not a manufacturer defect. Someone had modified it to allow a slow, continuous bleed, the kind that would accumulate over 12 to 14 hours, and reach a dangerous concentration level overnight. The kind that, if someone turned on a light switch or a burner in the morning, would. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Daniel's Lexus turned onto our street at 7:42 p.m. I know the exact time because I was sitting in the back of a police vehicle, wrapped in a foil blanket, watching the street, and I looked at my phone at that exact moment because Marcus had just said something and I was reaching to show him something on the screen. The headlights swept across the front of the house, the car slowed. Then it stopped. I imagined him seeing the police units, the gas truck, the lights. I imagined the precise moment his face changed. He tried to pull a U-turn. The second patrol car that had been parked half a block down pulled out and blocked him. Daniel got out of his car with his hands up, and what I was later told was an expression of complete bewilderment, the performance of a man shocked to find authorities at his own home. He asked what was going on. He said he'd just gotten back from a conference. He'd been worried about his wife and stepson. One of the officers asked him to confirm the conference had ended today, not Saturday. There was a pause. They arrested him in the street in front of the fence he had locked me inside. Aunt Claire drove down from Portland 4 days later. She was Renee's younger sister, same dark eyes as Marcus, same deliberate way of considering things before she spoke. She hugged Marcus for a long time on the front porch of a house that was no longer the place either of them had to pretend inside of. I stood a little to the side, unsure of my place in a reunion I had no history in, and Marcus looked over his aunt's shoulder at me and said, "She's the reason we got out." "We got out together," I said. The investigation moved quickly once it moved at all. The modified gas regulator was entered as evidence. Forensic accountants began untangling 3 years of Daniel's financial activity, including 2 previous life insurance inquiries, one of which predated Renee's death by 4 months. The detective assigned to the case told me, carefully and without making promises, that they were reopening the circumstances of the accident that killed Renee. I won't know how that ends for a while. These things take time. What I know is this: I filed for divorce the week after Daniel's arrest. I moved into an apartment in Raleigh with 2 suitcases and a coffee maker my sister brought over. The dental office gave me time off and then gave me my schedule back when I said I was ready. I go to therapy on Tuesday evenings with a woman who has a plant wall behind her chair and who told me in our first session that recognizing a trap after you're inside it is not the same as being foolish enough to walk in. I'm still working on believing that. Marcus is in Portland now, living with Aunt Claire. He started 8th grade 2 weeks after he arrived, under his real name, walking through the front doors of a school for the first time in 3 years. Claire texted me a photo of him in his first day outfit: jeans, a gray hoodie, sneakers, standing on the front steps with his backpack on. He wasn't smiling exactly, but his chin was up. I have that photo saved. He texts me sometimes. Short messages, the way 12-year-old boys text, mostly reaction emojis and the occasional complete sentence when something actually matters. Last week he sent me a voice memo which surprised me, and in it he said, "I got a B+ on my English paper. The topic was a person I admire. I didn't write about you because I thought that might be embarrassing for both of us. But I wanted you to know it was going to be you." I sat in my car in the parking lot of the grocery store and listened to that voice memo 4 times. There is a version of my life where I never opened that filing cabinet, where I dismissed the insurance policy as routine and went on making Marcus's breakfast and waiting for Daniel to come home and ignoring the slow, quiet accumulation of things that didn't add up, where I turned on a light switch one October morning and that was the end of the story. I don't let myself think about that version very long. What I think about instead is a 9-year-old boy who loved his mother enough to carry her last instruction for 3 years without breaking, who taught himself to survive by being invisible, who, the moment the door finally closed on the man who had taken everything from him, stood up, walked across a kitchen floor, and chose to trust the one person left in the house. I think about that, and I think, if he could carry that, and still choose to reach out a hand, then whatever I have to carry is something I can figure out how to hold. One day at a time. One step at a time. Just like he taught me.